Great. Thank you very much, Brian, and welcome everybody. Welcome to our global audience for this Software AG webinar. And as Brian said, I'm Simon Pritchard. I'm part of the UK management team, and I'm introducing the webinar because we're delighted to have one of our UK most important UK clients speaking, BT Openreach, and I'm here with Debbie Bennett from BT in their offices in Brentwood in the UK. To share with you some of the insights from implementing a sustainable business controls framework. So just as a brief introduction to the structure of the session, we're going to try and wrap up the main content here in around about 40 minutes to allow time for some questions online from the webinar participants. So after a very brief introduction from me, I'll ask Martin Kling from Software AG to position the kind of cross-functional, process-orientated approach which Openreach have taken and others throughout the world have taken and adopted, and explain why this approach can deliver both improved risk and compliance management and at the same time help control the cost of compliance. And then, as I said, we're delighted to have Debbie with us from BT, and she'll talk in more detail about the specific organisational circumstances that led to the adoption of a business controls framework at BT Openreach, her experiences of leading the implementation and the management of that kind of system, and the results which BT Openreach have achieved here. I'll then ask Martin to come back and provide some insight into the benefits, the wider benefits that can be driven out of this kind of implementation, and where perhaps a business case can be made for the adoption of an integrated approach and software to support that. And then finally, Martin will give us a flavour of how governance, risk and compliance solutions may evolve for the future, what higher levels of maturity will bring, and outline a vision for the future of governance, risk and compliance. As Brian said, we'll be asking questions throughout, so we're looking forward to being able to share with you at the end of the webinar your input and assessment of your own current status and future plans. So just to continue the introduction, for those of you particularly outside of the UK who may be unfamiliar with Openreach, they have a unique perspective on compliance and risk management, having been formed in 2006 as a direct result of market reform related to the deregulation of the telecommunications market in the UK, and I think Debbie will share a little bit more of an insight on that in her session. BT Openreach manage the vital last mile of telecoms infrastructure in the UK, linking nearly 30 million homes and offices to the offerings of various service providers who are under law entitled to the same equivalent access through the Openreach infrastructure. Against this background, Debbie was instrumental in driving forward a programme to put in place a sustainable and cost-effective business controls framework, and Debbie will share that experience with us a bit later on, and will also be available to take questions as we move through. Sorry, at the end of the session. Sorry. For our part, Software AG. Again, for those of you with no previous experience to Software AG, it's worth explaining. We are an international software company with headquarters in Germany and revenues in excess of €1 billion. We have a wide product portfolio, including brand names like Natural, Adabas, Web Methods, Centrosite and Aris, which is the primary focus of this conversation today. But where those products come together is in enabling business and IT and different aspects within the business to come together around a common understanding of the business to implement effective and rapid change. And that common understanding almost invariably involves looking at the business from a process perspective. So that, if you like, is the common theme that unites our products. A key component of that is the Aris platform and methodology, which enables people to organise their their thinking about the business around business processes, to become process aware and to take a business orientated approach to process improvement, but also critically to their management of governance, risk and compliance. Further information, if you're interested in going into more detail on what other clients have achieved and other resources which are available, there is a dedicated website from Software AG called GRC Lounge. It's grc-lounge.com, and you can access various other bits of information and resources on that site. So, just before I hand over to Martin, I guess we thought it was worthwhile just explaining a bit of background into how we've ended up here today and why choose this particular topic. And what motivated us to put this on and focus in this particular area of improving business performance with risk and compliance. Those of you grappling with regulatory change or compliance issues, whether that's the payment card PCI type regulations or Solvency II in insurance or any number of other regulatory and compliance burdens, may be thinking, well, there's a business process improvement, performance improvement as well. And that may well be the case, but historically, the fact that different internal functions and external service providers have come at somewhat similar issues of operational risk, financial controls, regulatory compliance, and often created a kind of patchwork of overlapping controls, imposing a sometimes a very high burden on the business, is simply something that I think increasingly people are seeing as unsustainable, that business cannot afford that kind of overhead and burden, and that the whole regulatory regime within organisations has to be rationalised. It has to be coordinated between functions, and where possible, automated using tools and methodologies to do that in an efficient way. The problem with the way that the kind of spreadsheet and Visio chaos that exists today is that at best it's inefficient and painfully expensive, but at worst it creates a resentment in the business and potentially leaves a gap between the business reality, what's actually going on, and what the regulatory compliance internal audit is actually measuring. So that gap is a risk for the organisation and not one that can be allowed to continue going forward. So that, I think, is what we see as the problem, if you like, the current state of quite a lot of organisations' responses to regulation and compliance. On the flip side, on the upside, what we also see is a big opportunity, if those issues can be addressed, to deliver financial returns to the organisation, either in terms of reducing the cost of compliance or in terms of bringing together risk and compliance views with those of the business to make better, more informed business decisions. And this is a view which is shared by others. This research from Ernst & Young, which I think hopefully you can just about make out the link there, but their recent report from February 2012, Turning Risk into Results, identifies a positive correlation between those organisations that have mature risk functions and the kind of business results that those organisations achieve. And they also find that effectively harnessing technology to support risk management is the greatest weakness or opportunity for most organisations. So I think that really sets the scene for the rest of today's session. We're going to have our first poll question at this point, and if with any luck it will pop up on the screen for you. We're going to ask for your input to give us an assessment of the level of integration within your organisations or between the various functions. We've given some here. There are others actually that have a view on this, but between, say, operational risk, regulatory compliance, finance and audit activities. And we've got three potential responses here, from completely uncoordinated to some coordinated activity to what we see as a kind of a pretty high level of integration where we've got a shared software platform. So that question will stay on the screen for a little while for you to gather your input. But at this point, I'd like to move on and introduce our speakers for today. And we have a little bit later on, you'll be hearing from Debbie, who spent past 23 years with BT through a variety of different roles, including billing process transformation, before in 2008 taking up a position on the Openreach Business Controls Framework team. And she's been here now for 3 years, working alongside Software AG to implement and manage the ARIS GRC suite of systems here. But before that, Martin Kling, business development for governance, risk and compliance, based in Germany. Martin will talk to us about the background to the system that's been implemented here. And Martin's background is, as a practitioner, he was with various companies, but including Infineon in Germany, where he was in charge of process and governance, and as part of that was involved in a Sarbanes-Oxley, a SOX compliance implementation there. So he's been on the other side of the house and implemented systems in this area as well. Martin's now highly active and actively involved with customer projects, and is also a well-known author on governance, risk and compliance. So, Martin, over to you.
Well, thanks for the nice introduction, Simon, and welcome to everybody listening to our webinar today. I have the honor to, give the first part of slides on the background of our tooling, and then I'm, as enthusiastic as you are about hearing about the achievements Openreach had. So let's jump directly into the slides. Actually, some words more to what Simon already said on Software AG. You see, we have a lot of customers. Many of them are in the financial area. As you already pointed out, revenue is slightly above 1 billion. And I think there's a reason why we are well seen as a global leader for business process excellence and integration topics. This is where we come from, and this is our, let's say, in our genes to talk about processes. And I put that here for a reason to show you how we come to the topic of GRC. I will comment on this on the next slides. So some more numbers here. You see we have over 5,600 employees worldwide, a lot of consultants here who can serve you. We have offices in more than 70 countries now. And, there's a lot positive to be said about Software AG. Talking about how we are seen by others and talking about how we come to the topic of governance, risk and compliance. We talk about business process excellence, and then already for years the topic of how to govern all those things, how to keep risks in balance, and how to ensure that processes are actually working in a way like they are meant to be. This is what is labeled GRC today. But we are doing this already for years. And this is recognized by analysts as well. You see on this slide, on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, actually we are in the visionary segment in this. I think we are in the visionaries because we have some, good things for today, but even better things for tomorrow. And I will give you some indications on that as well. How we tackle GRC. We talk about processes. If you have a process running in your company, you need to, attach risks. You need to map them into the areas where you actually work on them. You want to define and document what you're doing on the control side. All these things are very much related to business process management. So the first step in any GRC endeavor is to identify the risks and define the efficient controls as shown now on the slide. The next step you have to do is to check all external and internal requirements to your business and map this into the business process side. If you miss out this step, you will never get a clear overview if you covered everything you need. And more on for the future, you will not be able to have a sustainable way how to handle changes in regulations, changes in your all internal policies and all that stuff, and see how this affects your business process. Next step should be that everything needs to be measurable. We are talking a lot about performance today. Performance and GRC are tightly connected, and so you should define not only key risk indicators but also key performance indicators that are needed to manage your business process work. But in a certain way, this is all just about how you think your business is running, about your to-be processes. But there's another side to life, and that's business reality. And we, even if you're strong on the business process analytics side, we know that there is a differing business reality, and we have a lot of methodology and tools and support to check also on this side. If you have all your risk and controls in place, you still need to monitor how those controls are running, if there are exceptions to them, if there are process deviations. You need to monitor how your defined KPIs are actually running over the time. And only if you compare this always with your to-be process, you will get a sustainable approach with GRC. This is basically how we, from a, methodological point, address the topic, and we have a lot of tools that help to address this. I just have one overslide here for today to give you a feeling here. We have for sure covered all the governance, risk, and internal control levels of processes. We help you to identify all those issues. We help to evaluate, and for sure, we help you to respond and to manage everything that is running around in the GRC area. On the right-hand side, you see all the modules we are currently providing here. For sure, I talked about mapping risks and controls into your processes. But for sure, you want to handle your policies. You want to have a lifecycle process running on these. You want to have support for your audit management activities. Maybe you just want to use surveys in certain areas and ask how everything's working. For sure, you want to do the classical stuff like control testing, risk evaluation, or loss and incident tracking, and you want to follow up on deficiencies and issues and see how your measures are working over time. There's a lot more to be said here. Just one point out, we even have the possibility to run a simulation along your process change and see how risk and control behavior is over there. That will help you a lot if you want to decide on, implementing more controls or checking if a certain risk is actually covered. This is the overall setup, and I think you will have some more insights from Debbie later on the actual doings at BT. But one slide I wanted to show with you before moving over. And actually, I was on a panel with Chris from Forrester, and he presented this slide then, and I like it very much because actually I couldn't have done a better one. If you talk about GRC maturity, you have always differing levels, and if you put it in 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 levels, this is no big difference. But what you have is that everybody is starting with GRC documentation. You have to do manual assessments, you do manual workflows very cumbersome, mostly based on Excel, and as long as you do not pick up business processes as a main element for integration for all your activities, you're really stuck in your day-to-day GRC work. And he was talking a lot about what he calls is automated GRC. Actually, it's starting with business processes in your mind, and then it is moving to control monitoring along processes, to check on dashboards how your processes behave and how the risks in those processes are behaving. And then the next step that you have to take is to combine this with your own ideas on business performance. GRC and business performance are actually the two sides of the same coin. You cannot take on every risk without having some drawbacks on your performance. You cannot put on too many controls without having influence on your performance. And so the next step you will then have to take is to go for an integrated way of seeing business performance and all the other GRC activities, and to automate the monitoring here and to check how those relations are working together. And I think we are coming now to the second question in our polling tool. So if you look to the right side of your screen again, to the poll questions, the question I would like to have answered from you is, to what extent risk assessment and the management of control testing are automated in your companies, or how do you say, how major your company is if you compare it with GRC maturity as defined on the left-hand side by the Forrester tool. So it would be great if you answer this question as well. I will give you some seconds before moving on. And actually, moving on means that I give over to Debbie Bennett from Openreach, and she will talk about her project.
Thank you, Martin. Good day to everybody on the call. As you know by now, my name is Debbie Bennett, and I'm going to share my experience on how we have worked on implementing an effective business controls framework at Openreach. As Simon said earlier, Openreach was formed in about 2006 and had to react very, very quickly to a marketplace where we were heavily regulated and obviously had to operate our business in a very equivalent environment. We spent a lot of time at the setup of Openreach segregating our systems and documenting our processes, but albeit it was very reactive. So after, in about 2008, when I joined Openreach, we looked at how we could effectively manage our business going forward. Why should we implement what we call a business controls framework? And as you can see, we had some support from the very senior team within Openreach, with our CEO, Liv Garfield, basically putting the message out there that it was absolutely critical that we were to get a firm grip of our business controls. Obviously, the integrity of our billing and basing our management decisions and having confidence to drive new initiatives was absolutely paramount to the business. We also had to look on how we would support this going forward in terms of having a governance system, a risk and compliance management system, some repository where we could manage this in an automated fashion, again, so that we could have confidence in our ability to deliver our products to our customers. Openreach was very much working in a very silo organisation. We did have processes, we did have systems, but we had no end-to-end responsibility or accountability across the whole business. And what we wanted to move to was looking at an integrated and efficient business, a business that's in control. So the question was, why do we need a controls culture? Well, as I've just actually alluded to, we were, as I said, working in silos. We had a lack of operational focus. So we were not in control. The risk was controlling the business. We hadn't documented these business controls, let alone identify where we had remediations or areas of concern. So we found ourselves in a firefighting situation. On top of that, as Martin was just explaining, not only do you have to implement your controls, you have to have the capability to test those controls on a regular basis so you don't get any surprises. And understand where you've got gaps, where you need to remediate particular areas. And of course, in business nowadays, you need to understand what the costs are. What's the cost of these controls? You know, where are we resource hungry? Where do we need to deploy our resource? And in forecasting, that's absolutely, you know, the cornerstone of our business is forecasting how we're going to actually, how we're going to be profitable going forward. But we didn't have anything to base this on, and it resulted in a lot of rework. So we worked with Ernst & Young, and we came up with a vision what we call the BCF vision or the BCF methodology, and we put that into a framework, which, as you can see, very much counteracts what was our problems. We no longer wanted to be reactive. We wanted to be preventative. We wanted to be risk-focused. And most of all, we wanted automated controls. And we have to meet the industry standards. As Simon has stated, our actual business is heavily regulated. We do work in a heavily regulated environment. We have to be compliant to that regulation. We also have to be equivalent. So we have to work on best practice. We have to make sure that, our SOX controls are operated and we have the appropriate evidence to obviously, present to the industry at an industry standard. So we came up with what we call the BCF methodology or the BCF life cycle, which in fact is really in itself a 5-stage process. And we constantly, no matter where we're looking in the business, whether we're looking at finance processes, product processes, anywhere in our business, we implement this life cycle. And we actually work through this in a very methodical way. So we start off, first of all, doing a risk assessment. Where are our key areas of concern? What processes do we need to be looking at? Where are they documented? How are we going to manage these going forward? And where they were documented, we would either review that documentation or we would redocument them from the start. And then we would actually do a controls and risk assessment overlaid on top of those processes. But more importantly, as I said before, we need to make sure these controls are tested and operated on a predefined basis. Our key controls need to be tested regularly. We do have other controls that need to be tested less regularly. But we have to make sure they are tested and the evidence is provided. Obviously, where a control is tested and is found to be not working correctly or is not there in the first place in the process, we would have what we call a control gap. So we would have to remediate that gap. And we would ensure that that is remediated and closed off, and we do have the appropriate mitigations in place before it falls back into the life cycle and the continual testing. What we do have as well, which we definitely didn't have in Openreach before we started the business controls framework, was the sign-off process. Now that means that we have identified business owners, so people within the Openreach business that sign up to be responsible for their particular processes and the controls that are operated within their processes. What that means is that we do have accountability and we are proactive, and if at any point somebody doesn't sign something off, it will flag up and we will always ensure that we have business ownership going forward. But more importantly, what we needed to do, and as I said before, is that we need to find an automated fashion, an automated system which supported this life cycle. So what was out there in the marketplace that would support this methodology? Now, having done a rigorous vendor selection, we came down to Software AG, their GRC methodology, absolutely supported what we were doing in the business controls framework in Openreach. So if you remember the life cycle that we had on the previous slide, we were working with Software AG and they had a whole set of modules within their governance, risk and compliance platform that supported every stage of that methodology. So what we did in Openreach is we looked at, we were previously documenting all of our processes either in Visio or in PowerPoint. There was no central repository for processes, let alone the central repository to then go and overlay the risks and controls on top of that. So working with Software AG, we used the business architect or automation architect to actually document our controls. So we have a one-truth version of all of our processes. We then overlay that with actually looking at the controls that we've documented. How are we actually going to test them going forward? So we use, in the testing area, the Risk and Compliance Manager. And that automatically triggers audits. It's a workflow system that allows people that we've identified in the business as control operators to actually go and operate their control and actually be able to provide the testing evidence that is needed to ensure our controls are working effectively. We then also have the sign-off piece, where we use the governance side, where we get the business owners, as I said before, to sign off against their particular processes. But in order to do that, they have the evaluation module within the Risk and Compliance Manager, which allows anybody in real time to actually go and look at the status of the testing of their controls. So they sign off with confidence that their processes are working correctly. They have all of this available to them. They can see their processes, they can see their controls, they can see where the risks occur, and they can sign off that controls are actually being worked effectively. We also have in the follow-up module here, we use Mashzone, which is the ARIS Mashzone module, which allows us to slice and dice our data and have dashboards on how we're performing. So from a senior management point of view, at any point they can look at a particular dashboard and see where are we in terms of our controls. You know, as a business, are we in control? So we can go back to that senior management team that were there at the beginning, right up to our CEO, and say, here are all our controls, here we're testing them, here's our evidence. We're meeting our regulatory requirements, we're meeting our compliance requirements. And if at any point we're not meeting them, we do have the ability to go and take that up and ensure that anything that is a gap or is not being, we haven't met the requirement, is actually closed. We work through and ensure that it's a continuous cycle and that we are a business in control. So as you can see, it's the whole ARIS GRC and all of its modules that we utilise within Openreach. What we can also do, as I said before, we have this, the Mashzone, the ARIS Mashzone, as I said, which allows us to look at any point at how our controls are doing and report back to management. But to give you a flavour, we in Openreach, in the time that we have been using the risk and compliance system and the governance system, we have 200 plus controls that are operated on predefined basis. So we're looking at, like, within a year, we're probably testing upwards of 1,000 different controls throughout a year. And we can see and slice and dice the data in different ways. We can slice and dice that from a product perspective, we can do it from a risk focus, we can do it from a control perspective. So there's real flexibility and there is real knowledge and understanding now that sits behind the decisions that we make. So to go back, what have we delivered in Openreach and what are our benefits? We have business ownership and responsibility. We have our senior management commitment. We've established a controls environment. We have comprehensive controls and our risk assessment methodology. And we robustly test those controls month on month. And where we do have a gap or we have a remediation activity, we make sure that that is completed. We also redocument our processes and use the governance engine to actually make sure that those processes do stay as a one-truth process. So we do not have these processes documented in all different areas of the business. There is one repository for all of it, and that sits within the ARIS system. So we have adopted this controls culture within Openreach. It has been embraced, and for the first time we do have business ownership, and we are proactive as opposed to reactive. We actually documented all the processes around our products, so we understand how our products are performing, and we do have what we call a best practice methodology, which is now being adopted not just within Openreach, but we're now adopting that group-wide across BT. So, you know, we have been the leaders in terms of BT Group, and the power of it going forward has been recognised by our counterparts in the other lines of business. As I said, key controls are rigorously tested. We've actually closed all of our control gaps. We understand why, and we have root cause analysis. And just to give you a flavour, since we did have all of this information, all over different methods, we had spreadsheets, we had, as I said, PowerPoint and video. Since then, and since we've put it into ARIS, we actually made upwards of 1,000 changes in actually building it in the ARIS system and then managing it going forward. And now, as I said, we do have that one version. And we use the whole suite of the governance, risk and compliance systems that ARIS have to support the methodology. So in terms of a partnership, the GRC methodology and the BCF methodology couldn't be more closely aligned. So I believe, we have another poll question now.
Yeah, and I think Debbie, it builds on one of the key themes of your session, which is really that whole kind of life cycle. And what you've clearly got here, you seem to have a robust change control mechanism for handling changes, either coming from a risk regulation perspective or from a business perspective. And it'd be good to get our audience's view on to what extent they feel they have a similar kind of mechanism in place. So again, a few minutes to think about that question. And particularly as we are just handing back to Martin now to talk a little bit about perhaps other business benefits can flow, and also how GRC may evolve going forward.
Okay, thanks. That was quite interesting so far. So let's move on while the polling is still going on. Benefits and metrics for GRC programs. That's always a tricky point. As you heard, BT Openreach is quite satisfied with the success of their program, and I know from my experience from many customers and other companies that afterwards, after having a sustainable program running and up and running, afterwards they are all satisfied, but it's quite difficult in the beginning to define what are the key metrics and what are the key success factors they want to achieve. And again, I picked a slide from Chris McLean from Forrester for this, what he is using or proposing as a risk management success metrics, because it's quite cover a lot of for all the things you can think of. It's for sure about efficiency, it's for sure about risk reductions, and it's about performance. And so let's pick up some of those points here on those slides. Efficiency. Well, the bigger your company is, but not only if you're a real big company, it's even starting if you're quite small actually, then you have to talk about to manage those activities in a satisfyingly efficient way. That's not always easy, because you have a lot of people that are to be included in those activities. You typically have some kind of administrative people who really care about those topics. They're sitting somewhere in headquarters. And then you have a lot of people sitting in operations who have to contribute, but actually do not really care or couldn't care less about all your activities if you do not educate them properly, if you do not include them and get them on board in all your activities. And if you then, on top of this, have to call those people and tell them, well, they have to handle it manually, they have to do it via Excel. Well, in best case, you have a lot of administrative work. In worst case, you lose them just at this point again, when they have to fill in the 10th time the same Excel sheet and so on. So having a proper software support in place is very crucial for achieving any level of efficiency. And to give you an example from my own past, when I did the Sarbanes-Oxley program at Infineon in the first year, I was organizing the project office for it, so I know those figures quite well. We had about 120 people working on this project, and I say in average for 6 months in one calendar year. So that's a lot of effort just for the first year to be done. In the next year, we then installed the ARIS suite. That was how I came into touch with it then. And nowadays, it's a team of 4 people sitting in a corporate function covering all 21 countries they have to cover. I think the 4 big revenue centers they are having, and covering all processes that are somehow related to financial controls. And they are just supported by some local people who work with them. Or the rest is, let's say, 1 day effort in half a year for people who own a process, who own a control, and give their status reports and what is proceeding here. So there's a huge difference in administrative efficiency if you're using such things. But there's even more on it. Think about the risk side. Actually, nobody likes to talk about risks, and quite often we ignore them instead of actually managing them. That's typical behavior, I would say, for mankind, and it's not always helping, actually. If you really dig into your risk management, you will see that you can avoid a lot of risk events to happen, and you can avoid not only regulatory fines, but actually operational risks that are popping up in your business. And if you then go one step further and connect this program with appropriate tooling with your performance and performance measurement systems and your performance management and how you'd want to drive those activities, then you can actually gain a lot of money you would have never tied back to the actual proceedings of a governance, risk and compliance system. Let's talk a little bit about the future. Today we have some very good systems on the market for GRC. One of them is ours. We are proud of it. But going to the future, we will have more and more needs that are not covered today. If you look at, let's say, the recent history of all governance, risk and compliance activities, always SOX is coming up on the table. Sarbanes-Oxley was a major driver in this area. It was really defining how we see GRC today on a control side. It was, let's say, the basis for many other worldwide regulations, picking up a lot of things that were first developed with Sarbanes-Oxley, or at least first introduced into the worldwide communities of companies with Sarbanes-Oxley. But it was very document-driven. In the beginning, everybody was just scrambling around, feeling the pressure, picking up documents everywhere, and putting them together to suit an external auditor. Very soon, companies noted that this is not really effective and efficient, and then the first tools popped up. Those tools were not better than document management systems with some very specific GRC workflows on top of it. But over the time, a lot of companies noted that business processes are a key and crucial element of all those activities. And in the same time, more and more regulations took up similar ways than Sarbanes-Oxley was proposing to companies about testing, management assessment, that it's not sufficient just to say you want to do something, that it's necessary that you prove, that you double-checked it, that you work with it. Suddenly risk management was as well on the table and was asked for. And then the first, let's say, real GRC suites came up to the market that were process-based and where you could, check your controls along the process chain and so on. Today we are in an area where first companies are looking into real process monitoring. We have some tools, very specialized ones up to date, who check on business processes and business controls. But, it's all a little bit, still growing, let's put it that way. And still, this will go on. I'm really convinced that in 5 to 10 years to come, if you have a discussion with some external authorities about doing good or not doing good, then they will expect that you not only can prove, as today, that you did your internal management assessment, but you also will have to prove that you have really checked on your business processes in your systems, meaning your transactions and all the other things going on. And this is what we call today a real square for GRC, because it is real process-based and it's real time-based. And this is offering great opportunities here. If you think of really monitoring your key risk indicators and your very flexible control setups in real time, then before you even have a legal case, you can react to the situation and simply save money by correcting some things that went wrong. And, well, every day something goes wrong. So this is a very typical point. So we're not talking just about being compliant with some external regulations. We are talking about how to bring the viewpoint of governance, risk and compliance one step further, closer to your overall goal of your business performance. That's what you actually want to achieve with your company, with your business. You don't want to talk about being compliant with this or that regulation. This is a must you have to do, but it's not really what you want to achieve. You want to achieve, let's say, success, money. You want to gain customers. And sometimes, well, things are happening that then contradict those actual goals. And with all this in our mind, I want to show you now what is happening in our, well, development area on GRC, what will be actually there already this year for everybody to get if you want it. Today we are looking at the to-be processes with a typical GRC solution. This is fine and this is really good, and still it is not connected to what we have on the other side, that we look at as is processes in real time, checking on how they are running, what is happening there, doing analytical things. And this connection is just in development, and we will have as the next version of our Risk and Compliance Manager, that you then really can react on incidents as they happen. You can trigger a loss management, you can trigger assessments, you can trigger even testing or even automate testing and fill the test cases with automatic information coming from your business processes. And we believe that this will really take GRC one step further into the future and bring it even closer to our overall goal that governance, risk and compliance is just another wording actually for, well, business process excellence. So I think actually this is today's last slide here. So I have one final question for the polling to ask. This should pop up as usual now. And the question is, what are your priorities regarding GRC activities in the next 2 years? Do you go for automated control testing? Do you go for continuous controls? Do you simply want to make audits easier, faster, cheaper? Please choose, and let's discuss your answers in a second.
Great, Martin. Thank you very much for your input there. We'll just give a few seconds for people to answer the question. And I'm not sure if we're yet ready to share the results of the very first question that we asked you today, but as soon as that is available, that will come up. We've had a few questions as well from the audience, specific questions coming in, which we'll put to the panel in a second. But please bear in mind that even after the event, you can ask questions, and we will answer them after the event. So don't feel like you're time constrained. We can accept questions right up to the end of the session, and we will collate the answers and send them out to people. So an initial question, just while we're waiting for the poll results to come through, is I think for Debbie, which is about who within Openreach uses the compliance dashboard. So what kind of roles, I guess?
Basically, with the compliance dashboard, you have the flexibility to actually create your views to tailor to your audience. So anybody, as I said, from the CEO can look at the overall performance of particular controls or risks within the business. So we use it for reporting right up at the senior level. However, you can tailor your views to even down to, say, the people that are operating the controls or the process owners or even product specific. So you have real flexibility on how you tailor it. So you have a number of different ways. As long as the control is being operated, it's in the system, you can actually slice and dice that data and tailor it according to your audience. So there's not one single answer is actually available for anybody within the business, and you can create a view for them.
Okay. Just another question here about, we've spoken a lot about process. Question is, do you need to have modelled all of your process before you can get started with this kind of approach?
No, not necessarily. With our actual business controls framework, the whole point of the risk assessment stage at the beginning is that you look at whereabouts in your business is causing you a headache first, and then you focus on that area first. So in terms of Openreach, initially, just to give you an example, we said that our products end-to-end, what we call our lead to our cash, needed looking at. So we took the perspective as that we did a pilot with a couple of processes. We got that up and running. It was hugely successful. And now what we do is we do that risk assessment, and then we go into any particular area that is of concern to the business. So you build up that portfolio of processes that you're actually monitoring in the system.
Okay, brilliant. Martin, perhaps this is a question more for you. It's about policy management. So question is, governance is responsible for it, but how can we integrate policy management with compliance?
That's a good question. Actually, the topic of governance in those three letters in the acronym GRC is the most, difficult one to grasp. If you talk about policy management, we see some integration points and we are offering them as well. And actually, there's another improvement coming up. It's the next version again. I didn't talk about today, but still, let's just talk about policy management as it is now. If you have policies and you will for sure have some kind of a life cycle running, that you build them, that you check on them in a certain time frame, that you have the responsible people defined who agree and release those policies. This is all fine and good, but actually what you want to know now is how are those policies adopted in your company. And this is where we see a tie-in, for example, to what we typically call control testing, that you define certain checkpoints, you call it controls or indicators for your policies you want to test on if a changed or enhanced policy is really being adopted in your company. And some areas, some industries actually go a step further and really ask for a sign-in and acknowledgement by management people or team leaders that they will adopt a policy in their teams, in their processes. And it's not just sufficient to read it. They really have to, acknowledge, sign in, state that they are going to use it. And one step further, for example, the pharmaceutical or chemical industry, they are even asking for documenting that people not just have seen and accepted a policy, but that they have been trained this policy, and without that, it's not going further. So all those things.
Martin, I'm just conscious of the time, and we do have the poll questions, the answers to the poll questions going, so it may take a little while to just come up on the screen, but we wanted to share those with you. So the first question: so how integrated are the different functions within risk and control? And I'm just struggling a little bit to read those at the moment, but hang on. No, I just wanted to read the results actually. So we've got quite a lot actually unable to answer the question. So apologies if we haven't obstructed in a particularly good way. But those of you that did answer, the emphasis there clearly is on some level of coordination, but a limited number with common platforms that of the kind we've talked about today. So I guess that's to be expected, and leaves some potential obviously for further improvement there. And could we have the answer to question number 2? So this is to what extent is automation taking place? And I think we're seeing there the majority of people again in the documentation phase rather than maybe the business process phase. So And I think where the Chris from Forrester was positioning his star and then the arrow taking us forward again, those answers, I guess, are consistent with that. And if we can have answer number 3. And this again was coming back to Debbie's point really about the full life cycle management part. And again, most of the answers, the biggest single group is in ad hoc, no single version of the truth. So again, an opportunity, I think, for coordinated activity to deliver real potential benefit to the organisation. And then finally, question 4. So this one was, what are your priorities regarding GRC activity? And a much more even split here between continuous controls monitoring, which is very interesting, given Martin's comment that this is something which was coming, but it looks like the audience is looking at that in a fairly aggressive time frame. So something to bear in mind. These questions, I think, bear some further analysis, so we will share those with people following the call. Final word from me, really, to sum up on behalf of all of the participants. A final thank you to Debbie and to BT Openreach for sharing their insights with us, for you all for attending, and for your active participation in the poll questions. We'll look forward to some further communication with you, and we'll send you out the slides and the answers to the questions in due course. Thanks again.